Hello everybody, and welcome to my little video showing you the basics of how to make a badge or a button. It's a fairly simple process, but many people who have never done it before find it a little confusing, particularly with any specific machine they might be using to make buttons. I'm going to be demonstrating the Tecre equipment. That is a manufacturer of button presses and button cutting machines, etc., etc. So if you have that particular kind, this will be a super simple proposition for you to follow along. If you have some other kind, then I think it'll still be useful. You may have to adapt a little bit for your specific circumstance. So let's go ahead and get started. As you can see, I've got the basic makings of a button. You basically got three parts. These are just inverted versions of the same. You've got the button art. In this case, I'm using American Heart Association, an organization that I affiliate with. The back button, or the actual pin of the button, the top of the button called the dome, and then you have a little piece of mylar, which might be a little hard to see on your video there because it is clear. So anyway, those are the basic pieces. So I'll tell you a little bit about how to go ahead and create this art. It's a fairly simple proposition. You're basically trying to create a paper disc. It's not anything complex, and it's something you can print up on your home printer with great ease, whether you've got you know, a standard inkjet or laser or whatever you have. You can create it fairly easily. Now, I actually use a particular piece of software to build my buttons, and this is the software I use. This is just one of many. Build-A-Button 5.0. It's particularly useful and very simple to build buttons. I think I built the button that I'm going to be demonstrating today, at least the artwork for it, in less than 10 minutes. So it's very easy to use. But that said, there are many software programs out there, many of which who are free, that help you get to this stage, which is basically a whole page worth of buttons. So there's software out there that you can create. Now you could, in theory, make your own buttons and cut out your own circles, etc., etc. But it's fairly difficult to cut a circle by hand. That said, you can certainly create this diameter and then even draw on them with a pen or a pencil or customize and put art on them, etc., etc. But this is basically what you're wanting to end up with if you are creating buttons in mass or creating them you know, many at a time. Now the paper I use is this style. It's an Epson paper, but again, there's many papers like it out there. The most important part is you want to get a matte finish or something that has a non-shiny surface, so it's not competing with the shininess of your mylar. I use a variety of different papers. The only thing that I think is critical is to get a paper that is of high enough quality that you can get a nice sharp image, that the colors are well saturated, and that your button pops when it's finally done. So I'll leave you to kind of figure this out. That's a 5mm paper, and you can probably find it in lots of different places. Okay, so we start with a full page, and the first thing you need to do for this particular button process is to cut it up. So you can see I've got a standard cutter here. You just lay your whole page in here, kind of line it up, make sure you're in between the two, because we're going to cut a line of them like that. Just that simple. Obviously you could continue on, get good at this. You can cut them extremely fast. Well, mine not so fast. Be sure not to cut them so fast that cut your finger off. So you end up with a strip like this of, usually it's a 5/0 button, depending on the size. Now obviously if you got a bigger button, you're not going to get as many on a page. If you get using smaller buttons, you can actually get more on a page, but you want to end up with this strip. So now we're ready to cut them out. Now this is a specific machine created for punching or cutting buttons. Again, this is a Tecre brand. As I said, I really like these brands because they're very heavy duty. For the most part, many are using them to produce buttons commercially, but you don't have to. Now they're not inexpensive. I think this one was around $100 to get a cutter, but the difference is that these are made as pretty heavy duty machines. You can see they're solid steel, and they have a very sharp cutting edge that doesn't dull easily, and you can actually get replacement cutters in here in case it were ever to go dull. So what you're wanting to do is go ahead and stick the paper in there, in between the two slots, and then what we're trying to do is simply line it up so that that outward circle lines up with the profile of the button maker. Then you go ahead and just give it one easy push, and it will pop through there. Now there's a little silver button underneath here that helps you pop your art out to give you your final thing. You can see that silver piece underneath there. It just makes it a little easier to get it out of there, so you don't have to dig it out there with your fingers. Okay, so now we've got our button art, and you probably have hundreds of these at time to start. So we go ahead and bring out our button machine. And this button machine, I don't know if you can see it, the entire picture, is made of a couple different pieces, moving parts. You can see again, the construction is quite heavy on it. Let me just zoom up a little bit on that. You can see it's all heavy steel. It's the reason I like this particular brand. This is button maker model 125, made by the Tecre company. You obviously can get these in all different sizes. The model number tends to be the size of the button that we're making, and we're making a 1 1/4 inch button today. So obviously we're going to need to use the right machine for the right button. Okay, now there's a couple parts to this machine. You can see it's got a spinning caster here that has two different dies built into it. Now the purpose of that is that you actually make these buttons in two different pieces, in two different processes. Part of the buttons go in one side, and the actual pin part goes in another. So the nice thing about this is you can't really screw up the way you put these in here, because if you try to put the dome part in the wrong part, you can see it doesn't seat in there at all. It just kind of flips around and doesn't seat. If you put it in the other side, you can see that it actually locks down in there, and you can't really make a mistake with putting it in there. Now I like to load both pieces at the same time, so it doesn't matter how you load the dome, because that's just a simple disc. It matters a great deal how you load the pin. So you have to make sure that the pin part, and hopefully you can see this, the pin part of this, which pops open like that, so you can see the little pin sticking up there. I know I just took it apart. Goes into the clasp like that. I'm not trying to tell you how to do a button here. It's a lot easier to do these once the button is complete. Okay, so it's locked back in there. You want to make sure this pin clasp part is upside down like that, and that part goes to the left. Now I've put some scores on my machine. I added these myself so that you can make sure that that pin and the pin line is again to the left, but perpendicular to these lines. Because if it's not, you try to put your button on, it's going to be crooked. Okay, so we've loaded up this side. I'm going to spin it back to the other. Remember, we put our dome in there. So what goes on top of that is our artwork. It slips right in there. If you got the right size, it should fit very easily. And again, an important part of that is you need to make sure your artwork is perpendicular. Again, I put little scores in here, and you can easily see. I just eye this. I'm not doing any measuring or anything until it's about right, just by the eye, perpendicular, and it looks like it's upright. Then you just add your Mylar on top of that. And the Mylar comes in a tube like this. So you're getting many hundreds. When you order, you'll get the same number of Mylar tops for it. You take the top and you just drop it in there. And so now that's ready to actually be processed. Now, again, the process is two-step. So we're going to put this cam back under the press at this point. Make sure that it clicks, you get it all the way over, or your button's going to jam. So make sure it gets all the way over and you hear that click against the post. And then you just take the handle, and with just one easy squeeze, you just pull it back down on top, and you can hear it click. Make sure it gets all the way down, and then you release. Now at this point, you can see that the actual artwork and everything else has disappeared. It's actually up in this cam. so it's ready to accept or be pressed back down onto the pin side. So don't be surprised if it suddenly looks like it's disappeared. It's supposed to do that. So again, you swing your pin side cam back over, make sure that it's under the cam, all the way over against the post, and then it's just the same motion again, down firm. Doesn't take a lot of power, but you have to be firm with it. Pop it back up, spin the cam around, and there you have your final button. It's just that simple. It's not hard to do at all. You can get very creative with your artwork. As I said, you could take a blank disc and write names, do artwork with pen, paper, paint, whatever. There is some limitations in terms of the kind of ink or paint that you put on top of that. Some stuff does not play nice with the Mylar and it will smear. In experimenting, have attempted to use photo paper to do this. Doesn't work well on two reasons. It's a little thick, so it doesn't always seal well on the back here. Also, it tends to smear and interact with the Mylar. So you may have to experiment a little bit. Every inkjet ink that I've ever used or laser printing ink has always worked well. For the most part, you will not have problems with this jamming. Again, the Tecre product is very sturdy, very precise. I probably put 1,000 buttons through this particular machine and don't have any problems. Other machines, you sometimes will have crimping issues. They'll kind of come apart, or it'll get stuck in the machine and you have to kind of get up there and dig the thing out. So if you're going to make a lot of these, then you probably want to make the investment in the machines themselves. This machine is a couple $100. I think you can get them as low as $250 for a quality machine like this, but there are other brands that are much less. I just don't like fooling around with buttons. I want to make them quickly and with assurance that they're going to come out. So I obviously went to the higher end machine. One other thing that you probably notice about this machine is that it is clamped down. The machine actually comes with just the base, so it's just this freestanding system. Because you're making this motion and you're kind of flipping it around, it's a little bit top heavy, it can tend to flop a little bit. So I went ahead and made a wider base for it, just screwed it right down into a piece of board, and then I got a couple feet to put on top of it so it even is less likely to slide around, and that seems to work very well. When you get good at this, you can probably make as many as 3 to 5 a minute. That's pretty fast. If you've got all your materials all set up, it becomes kind of an automatic thing. When I have made them in the past, I will often be watching TV or doing something else that distracts me, because it is a pretty simple process once you kind of get used to it. That's about it for my demonstration. If you have any questions, you can put them on the comment section down below this video. But again, this was just a simple introduction to the process and use of this machine. Hopefully you can adapt it to your own circumstances. That's it, and happy badging.